Hello, everybody, and welcome into episode 3 of the Pack a Day podcast here on YouTube. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can always follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Got a few different topics that I want to get to and discuss today, but I figure probably the best place to start is on the injury front. Of course, we learned today that Layne Taylor was lost for the season with a torn ACL. Just devastating news for both the Packers and for Layne Taylor. I want to start with Layne Taylor just individually and put the Packers to the side for a moment. Layne Taylor battled back from that biceps injury that he suffered last season, basically was out the entirety of the year, comes back, fights back, takes a pay cut to stay with the Green Bay Packers, hoping that he'd have an opportunity to start somewhere along the offensive line, works his ass off to start at right guard, looks fantastic throughout training camp, comes in, plays really well week 1, and goes down with a torn ACL. From a personal standpoint for Layne Taylor, this is somebody who took a pay cut, so had the opportunity to go out, play really well, start for the Packers, and hopefully cash in next offseason with a brand new contract, whether it be with Green Bay or someone else. Now he's going to be coming off a torn ACL where he's played basically two and a half games over the course of the last 2 seasons combined, and it's going to be really tough and difficult for him to find any sort of market for a player of his age coming off those 2 injuries. He's probably looking at a vet minimum deal at best on a prove-it deal to see if he can kind of go out and compete. Hopefully that's in Green Bay, but certainly there's going to be no guarantees for that. So first and foremost, I am absolutely gutted for Layne Taylor. But secondly, from a Packers standpoint, from a depth standpoint, this isn't just necessarily losing your guard or a starting guard. This is somebody who, provides a ton of versatility across the offensive line. He's now played left tackle, left guard, and right guard in Green Bay. Could probably kick out to right tackle in a pinch. I think there's a decent possibility that he was David Bakhtiari's backup at left tackle as well. If he goes down, now you have some more major reshuffling to do across the offensive line. So this is really a difficult situation for Green Bay, and not only the depth across the offensive line, but really the depth on the team as a whole. He's just one of those players that's super versatile, brings a lot to the table. The team really seems to love him. Aaron Rodgers had nothing but glowing things to say. Matt LaFleur had nothing but glowing things to say. So losing Layne Taylor is a big blow for this team. And for me personally, this has kind of always been one of my guys since I started grading film back in 2017. He was one of my top rated players on offense in 2017. I thought he put together a really nice season in 2018 as well. Of course, left the game or the season early last year with the biceps injury, then looked really good this year in the one game before going down with the ACL. So he's kind of been one of my guys. I've enjoyed watching him play. Hopefully he can bounce back, but that's a devastating blow, not only for the Packers, but for Layne Taylor individually as well. The good news is that the Packers got positive news on Lucas Patrick. It sounds like he not only avoided major injury, but is probable to play this week. At least that's what the reports were. So it sounds like he avoided an injury and is going to be okay to play sooner rather than later. Whether he can get out there this week or not will remain to be seen, but at least Green Bay avoided a major issue there. Another player that has great versatility, can play center and guard inside, and now with Layne Taylor being out, his role could potentially increase as well. I've got to figure that it's Bakhtiari at left tackle, Elton Jenkins, Corey Linsley, Billy Turner, and Rick Wagner moving forward as the starting 5 across the offensive line. But I think there could be a Billy Turner right tackle, Lucas Patrick right guard possibility. So it's probably between Rick Wagner and Lucas Patrick as to who gets that final starting spot if Billy Turner is in fact able to go this week, or I guess in the weeks following after that. But I think Green Bay is lucky that they got away with the Lucas Patrick injury and not having it be anything serious. But those injuries are really going to be something to keep an eye on. You could potentially go into this week with no Billy Turner, no Layne Taylor, no Lucas Patrick. Again, it sounds like Patrick's going to be able to play, but that would really tax the offensive line. You could see more from John Runyon, who looked good in limited snaps towards the end of this last game, but you don't want to have to see it get down to that few offensive linemen, and all of a sudden, Yash Nijman and some guys like that are your top guy off the bench. So this could really stress the Packers this week, and hopefully we get good injury news across the offensive line as the remainder of the week goes on. No news on Kenny Clark yet. I'm going to choose to be an optimist here. Matt LaFleur was asked about it, and I couldn't tell if he was kind of laughing off the fact of, you'll see later in the week where he knows that he's not going to answer any interview questions, so he's kind of laughing off the question because he had kind of this sly smile on his face. Again, I'm going to choose to be the optimist and say that maybe he wanted to say that Clark's going to be okay, but chose not to. Either way, when he was asked about Clark, again, he seemed to have a little bit of a smile on his face. Again, that could be totally just in the fact that he wanted to avoid the question and not talk about injuries, but I'm going to assume that if there was something serious with Kenny Clark, there's no smile whatsoever on Matt LaFleur's face when he's asked that question. So again, choosing to be the optimist, and hopefully Kenny's ready to go this week. A couple other quick topics I wanted to get to. I went back and rewatched the game. Tyler Ervin was somebody that really stood out to me. I know he only had a few touches, but man, he had the 4 rushes. All of them were really good. He had the 1 pass reception, and then the punt return off of the safety, kick return, punt return, whatever you want to call it after the safety, where he had 18 yards on that return as well. The big thing that I want to touch base on is just that I thought he looked really explosive with the ball in his hands. I think they're going to be able to use him as a little bit more of a route runner, as a true receiver this year than they did a season ago. And it's just a player that you constantly want to get the ball in his hands because he's that explosive, that dynamic. I thought he looked great in week 1, and I'm really excited to see what Matt LaFleur is going to be able to do with him moving forward. And it just opens up everything with those jet sweeps. There's no more Geronimo Allisons taking those jet sweeps. Alan Lazard, even not somebody that I would have expected to have great success in that type of scenario. Even he looked good, but you get the ball in a Tyler Ervin's hands in those type of situations, and he has the ability to take it to the house at any given moment. So I thought that was a really positive sign from this last week's game. One of the negatives coming out of the game, and I know Aaron Nagler's been drilling Matt LaFleur. I asked Aaron Rodgers about it post-game as well. There was 4 or 5 timeouts that Green Bay called because of lack of tempo and needing to call it before the clock ran out. I won't get into all of it, but I talked to Aaron Nagler a little bit about this today on Cheesehead TV. But in the second half, I want to see teams, and especially Green Bay, not take a timeout. Those are finite resources that you do not get back. I would much rather have them take the 5-yard penalty and try to make up the yards, because you can do that in one play. You start burning those timeouts in the second half and you just can't get them back. And we've all seen how many games can come down to you needing those 3 timeouts, at least 2 or 3 of those timeouts at the end of the game, to make sure that you can stop the clock. Those are something that you want to hang on to. I would love to see Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers just take the delay of game penalty. Obviously, the ideal situation is they clean it up and don't have to do it in any way, shape, or form, and they can just kind of get the snap off on time. But in the situation or circumstance, especially in the second half, where you have the choice between taking a timeout or a delay of game, take the delay of game. I understand if it's a unique situation or circumstance where it's, 4th and 1 or 3rd and inches, something like that, and you don't want to back yourself up 5 yards. And situational football has to take over in those situations. But I think more often than not, I would like to see Green Bay, especially with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, take the 5-yard penalty. That does it for me. I do want to say one more thing that I think is really important. The Packers are now 3-0 in their history of the franchise when Tim Boyle has a rushing attempt in a game. So 3-0 when Tim Boyle has a rushing attempt of any kind. Of course, all of those are kneel downs at the end of the game. It doesn't matter. They're 3-0 when Tim Boyle takes a knee or runs the ball in any capacity. So take it for what it's worth. I was excited about it. That does it for me today. Make sure to listen in to Jake Morley and Jacob Westendorf, who did today's Pack-A-Day podcast, wherever you find or get your favorite podcasts. Make sure to check that out. They did a great job with today's episode. Before you go, make sure you hit that subscribe button. But that does it for me today. I'll see you tomorrow. As always, go Pack Go.